It's funny because, people do say we don't need artists, but then you look around and what would we have without artists? Even the houses that we live in, the human capacity to create is what keeps us alive.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm your host, Aranis, and today's episode is the first part of a two-part conversation with the amazing Danny Kidwell. Danny Kidwell is a fine artist and illustrator from the United States who has a multifaceted portfolio that explores a variety of subjects. Creating both personal and commercial work, Danny's art focuses on reimagining references from pop culture. So I'm going to start where I start with everybody, is just tell us a bit about yourself and how you became an artist.
My name is Danny Kidwell. I was born and raised in South Florida, and I became an artist because I was born with a congenital heart disease, and I could not do physical activity at the time because I was torn stem to stern, and they were like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. So I was only left with the one thing that I was kind of comfortable with, and that was coloring. So I would color in coloring books, and then one day I discovered Walt Disney and his movies, and Bambi was the first movie that really made me think, oh, I wonder how they make these. And then it turns out a whole team of people made them, and those people were called artists and animators. And so that's when I really started to do a deep dive into animation at like 5 years old,
Wow.
and the rest just kind of went with it. I was really into animation as a kid, and I was constantly doing drawings. I actually didn't do my first painting till I was at least 14. I always had trouble with painting, and because as a kid I was like really impatient, but I was always doing like pencil drawings and whatnot. And then I did my first portrait. I think I was in high school. That was of Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow, and a couple of people kind of pointed me in the right direction. They're like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this." So that's eventually where it led to.
So that's really, really cool because it's kind of interesting how a lot of artists start from early childhood. It's kind of
Yeah.
almost ingrained in you from early on. And I kind of always wonder, if you didn't have that kind of reinforcement from people saying, this is pretty good, maybe you wouldn't have pursued the career you're currently doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I like I said, I kind of had no other choice. It was either that or just play with my toys and watch Star Wars all day, which is what I also did. But I kind of, it's something that I rather enjoyed, and I found comfort in it. And I think I'm one of the lucky ones. I hear a lot of stories too about artists not having the full support that they need growing up, and I think that's really what happens with a lot of people is they get into like creative things, and they just they don't have that encouragement. And somebody tells a kindergartner, don't quit your day job. They don't even have a day job to begin with. Yeah. And so they get discouraged, and then they say, well, maybe this isn't for me, and then they become like businessmen or whatever. But there's also people later on in life, like lawyers, that have this like burning desire to like be creative, and they realize after time that somebody else was controlling their life path, and they finally made the decision to chase art, and they're pretty good at it. So I really think that everyone has a creative output. It's just a matter of who encouraged it and how you felt about it when you were younger.
See, that's actually very interesting because I guess one thing that we kind of think about is like, you have to kind of be a great artist when you're younger. We kind of don't really think about like, oh, actually, that's absolutely perfectly fine to come to art later in life. There's no absolutely nothing wrong with that. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on people to kind of know what they want to do with their life, at an early age, when realistically you have your whole life ahead of you to discover that. Like, just because you're doing something now doesn't mean in 10 years time you're going to be doing the same thing. I think you raise a good point, because actually, now you said that, a lot of artists I speak to and I know have actually started later on in life, and their work is incredible, and it's their life experiences that make up their work.
I mean, yeah, it's very, I've also talked to a couple of, I actually remember in high school, there was one guy who, he was a security guard, and he said, when I was your age, I was drawing a lot too, but I just go. And, being creative is part of being human. You don't necessarily have to be good at it. And I think being good or bad is just a perception of things. And it's what you choose to do with it is the direction that will lead you.
That's very true. And I guess this question is slightly wrong, but I'll ask you now. Is like, why is art important?
Well, art's important because, I have this, I don't want to say a theory, but that's basically what it is. A lot of artists are into holidays and, Halloween and Christmas and all those things, a break from the norm. And I think that's why art is important, is because not only are we taking a break from the norm, we're viewing something from someone else's perspective. Like when I'm doing figure drawings, I often get, I've never seen myself this way before. It offers a perspective to something that maybe someone hasn't thought to look at yet.
Yeah, that's cool. It's because, I think as somebody who's creative, why you create. But I think expressing that can sometimes be quite hard, because it's just like, if you could explain yourself in words, you wouldn't need to create images.
Exactly.
So I think a question like that is like asking people why what they do is important. I don't know, it's always interesting, because it's nice to be kind of challenged and think about, actually, why is what you're doing important? And then, is it important? And then, that whole rabbit hole of, what am I doing? Is my life worthwhile? That kind of thing. It's always interesting. But getting back into the kind of order. So I want to ask about art education, because you have a Bachelor's of Science degree in illustration.
Yes, that is correct.
And I kind of want to ask you, like, how was your experience having a degree, kind of experiencing the art formal education? And also, do you think it's important for artists to have an education, like a degree of some sort?
Well, my experience was, I didn't actually go to school for illustration like up front. I knew what school I wanted to go to. Yeah, it was almost like it was destined for me. Like everybody pushed me towards there, and I ended up meeting a lot of really good friends there. But I started out in animation, and in animation there was always the cliche of, oh, you're gonna be an illustrator because you draw good, and I was like, I don't want to do this. And then I'm really into 2D animation, right? And the school I went to really pushed the concept of animation, but then when I got into the classes, there was like one traditional 2D animation class. I think there might have been another one that was like the more advanced class, and I was like, and then my life drawing professor was really pushing me. He says, you're good, and so eventually I kind of just moved over in illustration because that's where it felt like it was heading, and that's where I landed. I think education is important, but not necessary. Um, you can go to a college and be taught by other people, learn other people's perspectives. But as far as academic, you can just as easily go to a library or even YouTube nowadays and learn all that stuff. So it's really what you're trying to do with it. I in school, you know, school is important, especially if you're trying to build a network because you meet all those people and you keep in touch with them. And then you say, oh, well, I might not be able to do this job, but I know someone else who can, and vice versa. So it's important in that aspect. But honestly, you know, it's it's only important if you really want to learn from a specific person that teaches at that school. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I kind of feel like you're right in terms of like we live in a society nowadays where you can just look on YouTube and it has like unlimited resources for everything you possibly would ever need to know, like, creative wise or other. So I think you are right. Like, I think it's about discipline more than anything else in terms of whether or not somebody needs to have quote unquote a formal education. It's about, having the mindset to want to learn and actually retaining the information you actually look at. Because, if you're sitting around watching Netflix, you could spend an hour watching something on YouTube that's going to be informative. There are ways around kind of learning. But yeah, that's a good point. I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm very kind of in two minds about formal education. I think it can be really good and it can be necessary in some certain circumstances, especially if you want to do something like, like host a gallery or kind of business management. Or I think business is more important for an artist to have some experience in than art in terms of education. And actually, it is on my notes. Do you actually have any advice on the business side of art?
Oh man. Well, I'm only 5 years into this thing, and selling my art as a business, and it, learn to say no. That's an important thing because
Yes.
if you take on too much, especially, and I think art is something very specific to where you create from you. Other people obviously pay you, to
Yeah.
create an image that they might have thought of, but it has to come from you. And if there's no connection, right, then it's not gonna be your best, you know. Uh, but learn to say no and definitely get out there. You know, that's something my classmates in school were not doing. They did not push themselves a little bit to go out and network. And I was willing to take the risks to do some jobs that didn't pay too well to build my portfolio. I think sometimes in the business, you definitely have to make sacrifices. And it's just part of the game, because people say, I want things for my portfolio, actual jobs that I've done, but then they are presented with jobs and they kind of go, no, but there's things that you have to take risks with. And, you may not like it, but if you're willing to give it a chance, it'll take you in the right direction, I think.
Yeah. And also, you don't actually know how that final product might turn out. It might actually be the best piece of work you've ever created because you're going to be challenged to create something that you wouldn't have wanted to necessarily create yourself. And it can sometimes actually be more helpful than a hindrance.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely like there's probably jobs that I've gotten that I haven't wanted to do, but it leads to the next thing. And I feel like I'm contradicting myself a little bit by saying don't say no, but also take risks. And there's a balance to it.
Yeah.
If somebody lowballs you, like, and it's a huge project, say no. Like, don't do it. But if there's like a logo design or something or a painting, and they're offering you a decent amount of money, say yes, because that's one more job you have in your portfolio, you know.
Yeah, and it's gonna as you said, it's about balance. So balance out your portfolio, show you can do different things rather than just the same thing over and over again. Because I think that's something we'll get into later for sure in terms of like the balance between personal and kind of commercial work. But before that, I wanted to ask you, like, what is the biggest challenge of being an artist?
I was actually I was looking at all the questions earlier just to like refresh my mind and whatnot, and that question stuck out of my head. And I think challenge is a perceptive word, you know. Um, and the biggest challenge can be, taking on a difficult project that you might not be comfortable with, but it also might be making money, you know. And there's so many different challenges that you can face doing art, especially if you choose to do it for a living. Um, Time management is one of them.
Yeah.
Life balance is one of them. Like I was up to 12 last night, working on a project for sketch cards. It was a personal commission, but I said, I'm willing to, because he's a regular client, and I said I'm willing to put in that extra time to make sure that you get what you need. And like I said, sacrifices, you got to make sacrifices. Yeah, I don't drink monsters or energy drinks, but there's some people that do, and it gets them through. I just tend to like take it easy, and that gets me through it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's good advice. Don't drink Monster Energy drink. Take it easy. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that advice a lot, actually. Yeah, the question. So the funny thing about that question is that is a question I ask every single artist I ever meet. Whether that's in person or online, I always ask them that one question because it's the perfect icebreaker, because everybody has a very different answer. So it's a great question to ask people. I love asking it because, as you said, it's very subjective. Like what you think is challenging is not going to be challenging for the next person. So
exactly.
It's cool. It's and everyone always says either making money or social media, which is great.
It's an entirely different game to begin with.
I know, that's yeah. So what kind of different hats do you have to wear as an artist other than just creating the work?
I'm not very good at wearing hats to begin with. So I have my best friend who's kind of my manager, and she helps me with the business side of things on the social media side of things. She's like my assistant slash manager. But normally I don't really put on other hats. I'm just myself, and I just talk with the customer or whoever's interested, and not even a customer, just a person. I feel it's important to be your authentic self, and it's so much easier than trying to kind of force something down someone's throat. If you just talk to them, I find that it works a lot easier. But as far as different hats, I definitely have to do invoices. There's a big business aspect to it, but I kind of put that on the back burner. Maybe I shouldn't, but
I'm not sure if you should, but
it's just things tend to come to me if I wait long enough. So I'm never like, I guess maybe I wear two hats: the invoice guy and the painting guy. But shipping the stuff out. Oh my god! You know what? Going back to the whole challenging thing.
Yeah.
Shipping out is a challenge for me. Like I'll get the piece done in 3 days, but if you want it like a week from now, forget it. Like I don't know what I have a mental breakdown just trying to put packages together. It's the worst.
That's actually really funny because quite a while back, what episode was it? I think it was episode, I'm going to say number 10. So it was quite a while ago now. There was an artist I spoke to, Felicity Beaumont, who's an incredible figurative artist. I'll send you her work later. Actually, you might really like her work, actually. I'll send it to you later. And the one thing that she said about challenges was packaging work. Like nobody teaches you how to package work. It's something you really have to figure out by yourself. And then also, as you said, actually getting it out on time in one piece, without being damaged is a whole nother ball game because that's out of your control.
Yeah, exactly. It's foam board seems to do the trick. But I haven't really sold any like huge pieces. I usually do like 8x10s and stuff because that's what I'm comfortable with. But I have shipped out like a couple large pieces, and if it's on canvas, I'm like, hey, you mind if I just take this off and and send it to you?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And I'm like, "It'll be a lot less expensive for you," and it works out that
Yeah.
way, you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think that's something that we don't really think about in terms of like it's all good seeing the art online, but we forget it's actually a physical object. Like it's going to be either owned by somebody or the artist actually has it physically in front of them. I think we
Yeah.
very much forget that is a physical object, and I think the idea of shipping it out and not really knowing if it's going to be damaged or not is, I think the panic of every artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's I don't even think they do that with like bigger studios now. I think bigger studios just say take a photograph of it, and well, I'm talking when I say studios, I mean like networks, television, all you know, they're like take a photo of it, and that's kind of why I got into digital work too, because I thought to myself, well, if they're gonna want me to do a photograph of it, maybe the art isn't complete when it's on the canvas. Maybe I can do something with it and Procreate. Which, by the way, I mean, I've seen some of the stuff. I think the Stranger Things poster when that show first came out, that was done completely in Procreate, and I still have not figured out how to get to that level in that program. I'm like, well, what? How did he do that? I could use a pencil to like paint some edges around my work, but that's it.
But that's really cool that you've got like almost like a goal you want to aspire to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's nice to kind of realize like you're always still learning. I think that's the thing about art, not just art, but just people in general. Like we're always learning. Like no matter how old you are, no matter how much you've done, you're always still learning something new. And I think that's really cool. That's really cool. And actually, let's get into your work. So, would you
Oh,
like to describe
okay.
your work for people who may not have seen it? Because quite very multifaceted.
Oh man, it's always because I think one time you asked for like an artist statement from me.
I did.
I I just have never, uh, this is actually like a lot of the questions that I saw that you kind of sent me were very like they hit home. I was like, I've never really thought about this before. So they're good questions, and this was one of them. Like I don't know how to describe my work, and I've been thinking about it all week. And I would say that there's definitely like a playfulness to it. Definitely like a because like I said, I was into coloring books when I was younger, obviously younger, and, and there seems to be a bit of that colorful aspect, play with the inner child going on, exploring things like Star Wars and but also there's more of a serious side to the work, I think, where I also like the theme of dichotomies, like complete opposites. Yin and yang, light and dark, uh, light and shadow. Um, and I want to say that some of my influences are people like Mark Davis and Mike Mignola, and I think the use of of the way I portray light and shadow definitely shows, but isn't an exact copy. Because when you see Mike Mignola, he's like, you know, dark on one side, colorful on the other. And I think that that's an easy balance, very sculptural. But, you know, I think it all goes back to just consuming all that stuff when I was a kid, and it just had an influence on me. And, I definitely also, as far as portraits go, um, I like to observe people. There's always a story in someone's face, and it depends on the artist, but I think it's the artist's job to kind of pull that out. What emotion are they feeling? Um, I've had many people tell me it's when I do eyes, it's like the eyes jump off the page and look at you, and I don't do it on purpose, but it's just something that I kind of have a focus on. This area in specific is always a focus for me, and I think that definitely shows. Also, like I like to play around with composition, negative space, positive space. I mean, but to describe my work, I think there's just definitely a playfulness, like a connection with the inner child going on there.
Yes, that's no, yeah. Connection with the inner child is actually a really good way to describe it, and obviously it is very playful and colourful. So yeah, that's perfect, and it's absolutely cool. And I think, to be honest, it's kind of I'm very, very conscious that the questions I ask people are stuff you probably haven't been asked for a very long time, because people don't really ask you to describe your work, and as an artist, it can be very hard to describe what you do because you do it instinctively. It's very kind of for you, it's very visceral. It kind of is natural to you. It's just something you don't even have to. You don't really think about it because you just do it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I love it when I ask people that question. They're just like,
I don't know. Let me get back.
Hey, look, that's cool. I'm glad you liked the question. So your work is a mix between personal and commercial projects, and kind of like what
Yes.
percentage of either do you do, like roughly?
Well, sometimes I do think that um, most of the work I've done in the past 5 years has been like commissions from other people. And while I do work for myself, um, I think there's definitely like an imbalance there. But I would say like percentage wise, maybe 70% for other people and then 30% for myself. But again, that all falls into my hands. Again, going back to saying no to things, I could easily just change that in the click of an eye. I may, lose the roof over my head, but I can always say no.
Wouldn't
Not
be
even.
ideal that.
Yeah, I mean it's fun, but the doing work for other people, I'm kind of in the process right now of actually trying to flip that. I do want to get you know a, a job, one of those things, and
Yeah.
and try and focus more on my work, and because my portfolio definitely needs to be built up. I think there's a lot of things that I want to explore that I haven't had the chance to.
Like what? Just out of curiosity, if you're comfortable sharing.
Well, uh, about a month ago, I had someone approach me with a project to do Rorschach designs, ink blot tests, but they were for like
Yes.
the street characters to hold at like a convention. And so I kind of want to explore like body image, and this will be getting into the figurative work, but body image, and a lot of that has the the, the scientific idea of beauty is just symmetry, right? And ink blot tests are usually symmetrical; they mirror both sides. So I think that's a very interesting idea to explore. And also with me, thinking about the whole inner child connection, I kind of want to explore that more because I had a habit of painting people yellow when I was younger and using a bunch of colors. And I think there's something that I kind of want to revisit.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I think seeing it now, would definitely be like a best of both worlds kind of thing. Um, Definitely more portraits. Um, there's just so much stuff. I mean, with the digital stuff, you can do so much. I mean, I try and keep most of it traditional, because I feel there's a disconnect with just doing stuff completely digital. Um, but I started the one figurative series of like figures with the flowers in the background, and that was all stuff that I found. I want to do more of that, but I just haven't had time. I got a bunch of ideas. I'm mind is constantly just, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. But again, time and money and all that stuff.
So how do you organize your ideas then? Do you write these all down?
Okay, so this is the crazy part. Um, I don't I don't organize the ideas. They all just stay there, and they filter out when I do the work. Um, uh, uh, I just let it ruminate, and but that's also a part of the creative process, it's rumination. And a lot of the creative process that I do uh, through for ideas actually happens when I'm on the verge of sleep. You know, it's very, and it goes into a whole meditation type uh, aspect process, I guess you could say. But I have this thing in the back of my head that just shows me images, right? And it'll explain the ideas to me, but it's almost like it's in like this, like in the snap of a finger. And then I wake up, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. Like when I was going through school, like teachers wanted to see thumbnails, and I would do like the first one, and that's the idea I had, and then I would do two more, like 10 more, because that's what was required of me. And they're like, I like that first one. Like that's how it happens for me. I don't, I'm not against thumbnails, but I've never really done them before, unless I'm doing like collaborations or stuff like that to get my ideas across. But yeah, it's
That's so interesting. But I wonder why
mhm.
it's like when you're about to go to sleep though. I wonder if it's just like your mind's way of kind of being like, this is what you're thinking about, this is what you need to do. Like that's so interesting. But it's also very, very funny.
Yeah, and then th- there's also I started looking into this about a month ago. I was doing a lot of things about a month ago, but um, there is a meditation practice called transcendental meditation. And what I found when I started practicing was it accessed that part of me that was creating. And what would happen is I would just like take a nap and I'd wake up with an idea, you know. And come to find out that that meditation process actually uh, activates theta waves in the brain. So it's a more restful sleep, and it feels like you're in between sleep and rest, or sleep and being awake. But it's this area uh, neurologically that uh, allows you to get more rest, and that's where a lot of creative ideas come from. That's what the scientists believe, anyways. So that's that's what I'm thinking it comes from. I don't know. It could be some higher self spiritual being telling me, "Hey, paint this. You'll do good at this." But I don't. I just create, and people ask me, and that's my answer.
That's hilarious. That's cool though, but that's true though, because like, hey, that's how if it works for you, it works for you. I mean, you can't really do anything about that. Especially when it's like to do with sleep, like what are you gonna do? Um, times before. Right. So I've done that plenty of times before where I forget to pause on that and I'm like, oh crap, that's not very fun. I actually once did it when I had an interview with some guy and we spoke for like 2 hours. And I ended the meeting, and as soon as I ended it, I was like, I didn't press record. Although to be fair, he was super lovely. We did it again. I was just a bit like, none of us had any idea what we actually spoke about. But we can do it again. But yeah, don't be doing that again. Anyways, okay, so I kind of want to ask you about commercial and personal work. Like, what is the difference between the two? Like, do you define them differently?
Um, oh man, yes. So commercial work is for other people. Um, Personal work is for myself, but there was also like so in school they taught us that illustration has, it can be personal work, but usually it has a very specific format that it's being used for. Like, you know, you're doing a book cover or a poster or a flyer, what have you, an album cover. But personal work is very much just a painting, a sculpture, what have you. There's no uh, intended goal for it. It's just it remains the way it is. An illustration is made for print in mind. That's commercial work, obviously. But I find that with a lot of like commercial work, I guess it's because that's what I kind of go after. It tends to be personal work as well, because I do Star Wars and all that stuff. And obviously I love Star Wars. So, it kind of works out. Um, but there's really not much more to elaborate on that. It's very, very simple. It's like, you know, you got to decide, where the boundaries is set, really.
So a question I didn't actually put on this list, but I've just thought about it because you were just talking. Is like, do you think
Mhm.
there is a distinction between an illustrator and artist? And do you think they're seen differently?
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, because there's for illustration, there's always the cliche, I guess, that everything has to be prim and proper and look dynamic and suitable for being on display. And uh, there, then there's the concept of the artist, which is just creating stuff, right? And it's been I've been asked this question before, and it's been years since I was like uh, kind of had dealt with it. But I do remember back in school there was definitely a split between the idea of what an illustrator is and an artist is. Like Leyendecker and Rockwell, those guys, they're illustrators, but they're very much artists at the same time. But I think with illustration, the cliche is having to illustrate a scene of some kind, um, which you could very easily do that with a painting, just being an artist. But I think an artist is more or less just exploring your entire breadth of creativity rather than just going down a specific path, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And the only reason I asked is because I've just wrote down a list of illustrators I want to send you, that people
Mhm.
whose work I like. A couple of them I've interviewed, but people I like. And I just kind of thought, like, why am I sending you just illustrators? Why don't I just send you artists as well? But you're right, because I think one of the kind of common denominators, I guess, for illustrators is that their work denotes to a story for a specific use or a specific thing. Whereas an artist
Mhm.
are a lot more expressive. It's kind of about anything. It's kind of a bit more ambiguous, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the way most illustrators start out is they're artists, and then
Yeah.
somebody says, "Hey, I really like your work. Do you want to do a painting for this, book, Harry Potter? I don't know, whatever." And they're like, "Sure, I'll do it." And then that's where the whole thing starts. But I actually noticed that a lot of artists are really getting into poster design nowadays. That's something I'm trying to go down because I genuinely love film, you know. Uh, but yeah, that's where my mind stops on.
That's cool though. It's interesting. I think the great thing about art and creativity is that you can really kind of learn so many different skills that are going to help you. So like, excuse me, like with poster design comes like, typography, comes graphic design, comes color theory, comes composition.
Oh
There's
yeah.
like so many different skills and ideas and things to learn. And it's kind of cool
Hmm.
because it's kind of never ending.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the beauty of everything is, you know, you tend to never stop learning. When you and artist block is a thing. I've been told I've never really had that, but I think what it might come from is, for me personally, I don't suffer from artist block because I constantly have ideas, but maybe it's I get tired of the same thing, and I want to explore something not different, but maybe a different concept. And um, that you know, and through learning different techniques, you tend to improve upon your work and also explore other ideas. And then that's where the whole I've never seen something like this before comes. I was like, yeah, I read a book last night. It's really interesting. You know?
Yeah, no, actually, that's a very fair point though. The idea of like looking at different kind of external influences that are not just say other people's work or other illustrators. Like you're right, like you can watch a film and be inspired. You can, read a book and be inspired. You can walk down the street and be inspired. You don't have to be inspired from people who are doing your craft. You can be inspired from other places. And because you'll be inspired from other places, your work would be a bit more original and it'll be from it would create it from a different place. Because I do kind of sometimes think I kind of wonder, like, is the fact that we're all so much online affecting the way that we create our work? Like, how much does social media change the way you view your own work and the way you choose to create your own work?
Mhm. Well, yeah, I definitely think, what you said about going down the street, being inspired, the idea is to like, you kind of want to think out of the box at some point. Um, and that kind of opens up possibilities. And, there's so many things in the outside world that you can literally just step on a rock and be like, oh, good looking rock. I'd love to paint that, something like that. But as far as social media goes, so I actually deleted my Facebook about a month and a half ago, maybe. It was getting way too out of control. Um, and I think there is, so I'm really into psychology. And so in the 1960s, there was a lot of studies done about connections to the prevalence of ADHD and the introduction uh, of the television screen, right? And uh, I think what might be happening is because modern technology is so new to us, as not even just people in this period, but just the entirety of civilization itself. Um, our brains cannot comprehend what is on the screen, right? And there's been studies shown that when people ask about like what happens in their dreams as far as screens go, people can hold a phone in their hand, but there's never anything on the screen. And it's because I guess our mind is saying, "Oh, this new thing," and we can't adjust to it. Um, and even my dreams are very very boring. I go to the mall, I go to the movies. I basically like do that in real life, and then go to sleep, and then do all that when I'm sleeping. But when I'm dreaming and I'm like sitting down in a movie theater, there's never anything on the screen, and it is the weirdest thing to me. and I've had other people tell me this about their phones and stuff. So I think there's like a definite disconnection. Our subconscious mind is trying to process it, and we go on it so much that it just can't keep up with it. But as far as like influencing art, I definitely think that it has some form of impact, especially at night. Let me tell you how this works. So the brain does something about an hour before you sleep, and it's a very good thing if you want to learn something, right? However, if you don't want to learn something and you don't want it to influence you, about an hour before, maybe 45 minutes, all that information the brain intakes, right? It begins to process it right before you sleep. The brain literally does a chemical wash, and it does that throughout the night, and it processes the information you learned from the previous day. So I guarantee you that if you go to bed tonight and you know try and learn something, or try it can be used as a form of accessing the subconscious as well. um Trying to figure something out about yourself around, for my time, it would be like 6 or 7, where the sun like first starts to come up. That's when the brain says, okay, let's try and process this. So, and dreams come from the subconscious, right? So essentially, when you look at your phone about an hour before, in bed specifically, like you have to be like laid down, starting to rest, because that's when the process starts. Your brain does all that by itself. Um, it'll influence you, and you won't even know it, because your brain is processing all that stuff. Because it can't process everything. Obviously, we
Yeah.
do everything as humans. So the images scrolling through social media will begin to influence you. And but um I think that the overabundance of images that we're exposed to definitely have an influence on us. And it's beginning to get to the point where I think we're going to have to take a step back and ask ourselves, like, what is this doing to us? You know, creatively, specifically. Other than that, I don't know. But, because I noticed that there, especially with the figurative work, there's that one style that's going around where it's abstract and kind of done with chalk. I think Martin D. Campus is the one who started it, the specific style. But there's a lot of people that try and imitate that, and I think that's good for learning, but it tends to seep into someone's style, and then you're like, well, is this the same guy? It all blends together, and that's not good. It's definitely affecting our creativity for sure.
Actually, on the subject of style, like how important do you think it is for an artist to have a style?
Well, okay, so here's my philosophy on this. Everyone has a creative language, right? And everyone draws a line differently. Like if someone, you take a ruler to it, it's obviously going to be the same. But so it's almost like people know how to creatively speak, and not just it in a visual sense. I think everyone already has their style. There's different subtle differences that like, for example, you look at two different artists, and that they are it's that artist. It's because they have a very creative language. I call it a visual language. Sorry, it's a visual language, and it's all based on mark making. right? And that's basically goes back to motor skills and how the brain operates. You know, you know, but I don't think that style is necessarily important. I think it's basically innate, right? And eventually you'll find something that works for you as you start to access that part of your brain. But um, it's style is important to sell yourself for sure. Um, I think that create ideas are more important than style. Style is how you would sell yourself or how you define yourself, but ideas take precedent over that because ideas, um, style is how you would, kind of, what's the word, execute those ideas, right? So it goes down the line, but if it's necessary to have a style, not it's there's so much of people telling us that we need things. And then when you start to think about it, it kind of you sit back and you're like, well, do I need this? Like, because 9 times out of 10, there's jobs in the illustration industry where I experienced it before. I got compared to Bill Sienkiewicz a lot, and I still do in the comic world. I actually did a job where they were like, "We want you to recreate this cover because you have a style similar to his, but we want you to make it in his style." And I was like, "My style is similar, then why do you need me to like, he created it and he saw it and he loved it. Thank goodness. I was afraid for that, but it's style is just one of those things. Like, do we need it? Do we not? I'm not the one who can say, but um, again, it goes back to how much of our creative identities are things that we've been told and things that we don't know.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think you're right, because especially like style is a good point for that. Like, you are always told, oh, you need your own style, you need to be original, you need to be doing something different. And it's like, that's partly true. There is some truth to that, because you want to be doing something different. But then different doesn't always sell. And if your aim is to make money, then you have to also think about what is going to sell, what is profitable, what is commercial. I think for me, I think when it comes to style, at least, I think a lot, as long as you're not directly copying somebody and you're not, trying to be somebody else, then I think, you'll have a style eventually, because you're creating from your own place. Like, as long as you're creating work that's authentic to you, you'll always have your own style.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was growing up, like, you know, I never had anybody telling me to, because my style is relatively, unique within itself. And I never had anybody tell me, oh, you need to do like master studies and whatnot. And, copy this drawing or copy that drawing. I chose to do it at times because I thought, well, if I want to draw Mickey Mouse, maybe I should draw him to learn how to draw him. But I think definitely there's that area in the academic portion of the art world. It's almost pushed upon a student to copy works to be able to learn, but like it again that influences your creative output. Because you're picking up visual cues, and then your brain says, "Oh, let me put this into my motor skills," and then it kind of all snowballs, and then you're studying Bernini enough, you're gonna become the next Bernini. It's
Yeah.
that simple. Because painting is just it's a learned thing. Drawing is a learned thing. It's when you kind of learn to step back from that and say, well, what if I did this? The whole what if I did this, and explored that. And I never they tried to get me to like copy paintings in school, and I was like, no, that's not me. Like, why am I gonna do that? If you pay me enough, maybe. But no, I'm not gonna do something like that now.
I think that's actually a really valid point though, because it's like now you mentioned it, you're right. Because in schools they do just teach people just to copy images instead of
Hmm.
being, creative and having your own identity and kind of thinking about what you're actually interested in creating. Is a case of like,
Hmm.
oh, this is you know a Francis Bacon painting, copy it, or like paint yourself in a Francis Bacon style. It's like, but that's not helpful. It should be more like, what are the emotions of this painting? What, do you see in this painting? Transfer that into an image yourself. There's ways of teaching people. I think maybe a bit differently, but hey, I'm no teacher, so
I mean, I think it's important. It's a responsibility as an artist, personal responsibility to find your creative voice, your visual language for all of that. And you know, by copying something, there's almost a hypocrisy in it because they say, they say learn from this painting, but don't draw anime. Don't draw those guys. That's not learning. But what's the difference? We're taking in visual information and learning from it. There's no difference. It's just a difference, very different in style. But yeah, it's just I think that it's the responsibility of the artist to find themselves. Education can help, but there has to be a time and a place where you say, okay, this is cool. I've learned enough. Let's step back and start exploring other things.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very that's a very good thought actually. And actually, I want to ask you about. So your work is very much embedded, well, at least some of your work is very much embedded in pop culture, um, which I'm very, very curious about, just because, as you can imagine, copyright. You use images, like, from Disney, from Pokemon, for instance. Kind of like, I'm just generally quite curious. As soon as I saw your work, I was like, that's exactly what I want to ask. So how do you navigate kind of the idea of copyright? What's creating images that are like from pop culture?
Well, so there's this law, copyright law is very ambiguous in itself. Like nobody,
Yeah.
I was, I took a copyright law class in school, and even the law professor, he was such a funny guy, but he was like, nobody actually knows anything about this stuff, you know, and so he's just like, draw it, but don't make a bunch of money off of it, and that's where it goes. But I've learned that a one image instance, like an original, won't hurt you. It's when you take that image and you start printing, hundreds of them, hundreds upon hundreds of them, and making money off that. That's when Disney comes to your door and is like, "Hello, yeah, here's this piece of paper. Stop it."
Yeah.
And but um, I, it's a very risky thing, and a lot. I've talked to some of the Disney artists, and I've showed them my work, and they don't say anything. So I guess it's okay, right? But
Well,
uh,
yeah, I guess so.
yeah. But either that or they just don't care. They're like, I just do this for the money. They don't. I'm not them. you know. But no, um, pop culture is definitely just one of those things that interest me. And um, basically, I was doing comic commissions because that's just what I am. Well, I thought I was into at the time, and while it was very interesting, I'm kind of growing out of that, and because uh, Superman. It's a artistically, it's a one hit wonder. There's probably some things you could do with it, but I like to explore the pop culture things, and it's more specifically, I like I like the stories of the characters. Because like Magneto, for instance, his helmet comes from the Greek myth of Hades and Hades' helmet, and that's what Hades used to like kind of block people out, and that's what Magneto uses to keep Xavier, all these things. Like when these characters were being created in the 1940s, they're linked back to mythology. Almost every story is linked back to mythology and the hero's journey and all that stuff. Star Wars, especially. Oh my god! But you know, don't get me started on that. But it's interesting to see how those things connect to the stories that they come from. But with Pokemon, you know, I started exploring Nintendo recently, and that's basically what got me into that. It's basically like what I like to explore tends to reflect into my work, and it just tends to be a lot of pop culture. That's all it is. Plus, commissions, comic commissions are really what sells. For me personally.
Yeah, because I'm just very interested because when I think of like artists creating images of pop culture, I think of people like Anti Lister and like Cause, for instance, who creates stuff based on popular culture, and they're artists that sell their work for, at least in Cause's case, millions of dollars. And it's kind of like,
wow,
art's art. The
mm-hmm.
idea of like it's hard to kind of copyright an image. And not just that, like I've always been told like, oh, you can't draw Mickey Mouse because Disney will come knocking on your door. But then it's just like, so people just do like alternative versions that are just that are not quite Mickey Mouse, but also not Mickey Mouse either. So it's kind of like it's like street artists. The kind of way that they reappropriate pop culture and kind of blend it with something new. I think that's very fascinating. It's just something I'm really fascinated with by just generally in terms of like, as you said yourself, it is quite risky because you don't know where that image is going to end up. You don't know who's going to see that image and potentially not be happy with it.
I mean, that's something that's always on the back of my mind too, because I do have a lot of Disney community following me on Instagram, and I've submitted work to the Disney Fine Art program, and there's like always that thing in the back of my head, like, are they watching me? Like, they go back to my page and say, "Oh, what's this dude up to?" That's always a concern for me. But I like to turn it on its head and think, well, they could just end up saying, "We want you to work for us," which has happened. I know a couple artists who get
Wow.
work from that. So as like I said, as long as you're not like making millions of bucks off of it. But the thought popped up in my head while you were talking. I think pop culture can also present a challenge to create something new, because there's such an abundance of images. Like I like Coke cans. Like I have a shelf of just Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola has a great marketing team going for them. Like Pepsi, they suck. um, but it offers you, by looking at something, it offers you to look at it and say, well, what if I did this instead? Instead of kind of perceiving it as I definitely want to draw this, step back a little and say, well, what if I did this instead? And that's kind of the approach that I like to take with things. Really kind of think about it before I just go into it.
That's cool because it kind of gives you a chance to kind of connect with what you're actually creating rather than just creating work just to create work. I think that's actually quite a good way to look at it. It's an interesting approach because, a lot of people they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to create this day and create it. They don't think actually, how is this actually going to like help you as the artist? Because, at the end of the day, you're putting your time into what you're creating, at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So it has to kind of serve you in a way, even if it is for somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, I've had this idea for the longest time to create like abstract paintings based off of pop culture. Something for like Coca-Cola and red and white. That's all it is. And then there's like you could do Star Wars things too. The top of the Millennium Falcon, make it a little bit abstract, pile it up, and make it textural and whatnot. And there's so much you can do if you just step back and you ask yourself questions rather than just, there's, and I think a lot of the times too, a collaboration helps with that thinking process, because I've done projects that get the best work from me when I collaborate with someone because we bounce ideas off of each other. I did a poster for the Bo Burnham Inside special, and I don't even watch Netflix, but this guy approached me. He's like, you know what, this will be perfect for you. I'm like, I don't even watch Netflix. I don't. Who's Bo Burnham? Like, but I had heard of it obviously, and that's also another interesting thing too. Like, pop culture is so everywhere, but then there's some people that are completely oblivious to it,
Yeah.
and it's what you choose to consume. That's what it comes down to. But he said you'd be perfect for it, and I was like, okay. But and I was like, I want to do something, challenging for this. And so the idea literally came to me. I was sitting at my kitchen table. The closet was open, and it was like a light shined right on it. And there was a back of a canvas that was visible to me. So it had the wood panel. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. It could be the frame of the poster. And then, you take different portraits of him and put it in this. And, everything is kind of inside, quote unquote. And then I thought, well, there's a lot of wires in the movie. So I literally took photographs of like plugs and all that stuff and, laid it on top of the canvas. And I just started building this. And then we kind of went back and forth with these ideas. And that's the beauty of it. And I'm starting another project now with another fellow artist. Uh, I think they work with the Poster Posse, but that's like a movie poster uh, advertising agency, and they collaborate with artists, and they're trying to bring back like the traditional poster, like hand drawn. And just to collaborate with them, I said, because I'm a big Disney fan, I said, what if we do like a Lightyear poster? And this person does like blueprints and stuff, very like architectural stuff. And I thought, well, what if, because the new Lightyear movie is supposed to be about the 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 movie that Andy saw that wanted him to get the toy. And I said, well, does this movie have a poster? And I was like, what if it's a movie, it should have a poster. So the idea I'm trying to create with this person is, what is the poster that goes with this movie that Andy saw? And not the movie for the actual, not the poster for the actual movie itself, but the movie. And yeah,
in the movie.
It's what if like just pushes so many different things away,
That's so cool. But that's interesting how ideas can come to you just from kind of like seemingly out of nowhere, or it kind of just shows that, like, obviously the way you see the world is very different. And actually, that's a question I don't think I just this list, which is the idea of like, do you think that being an artist gives you a different perspective on the world?
Oh, well, I mean, things can be definitely mellow and dramatic a lot of the time, but but I tend to be um, with portraits and stuff. I'll tell these people, you have a really nice nose, or really nice eyes, or something like that, and I always tend to view things that people don't like about themselves, and that's for portraits, figurative, everything. It's I tend to take something negative, perceived negatively, and turn it into a perceived positive. And I guess that's just the way I view things. There, and it's also like, man. So, and I think art can sometimes limit what you perceive or how you perceive it as well, because you're stuck in a studio for so long, you don't know what's out there, you know and then man, I remember um working on my first like figure drawing final in school. I spent like 8 hours straight just doing big like 16 by 20. I didn't have to do this, mind you. I just something inside me said I want to do this, and like I went back to the TV, and all I was seeing was like cross hatching and lines and everything. So there was definitely a blend of like my drawings were becoming reality and vice versa. And I was like, no, turn it off. I need sleep. But yeah, I mean, I I think the things that we perceive just tend to influence our work more or less. So, I mean, I may have a different view than most people. I may not. And I think that's kind of what helps with art too. Is like once you get it out visually, because it's a visual medium, then people are like, "Oh, is that what you see?" Hey, that could be either a good or a bad thing, but it helps for sure. But I really don't know personally. You know.
That's so funny. Is that what you say? Like, yes,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, but then
Like,
that's a good thing though. Like, art allows you to kind of express things you can't speak about, or like say things, or like showcase emotions that you can't really speak about. I think that's really the kind of the joy of it a lot of the time.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, and the same thing can be said about music as well. You know, sound is a very important thing, and there's definitely different chords that you can hit on the piano that that'll evoke an emotion, and for some reason, there's something in us that resonates with that. Yeah, and I think it's just an innate thing, unless you're like tone deaf or something. But you tend to like feel it, And again, I think all of this like just goes back to the emotions that people feel, and it's more or less, maybe art is about getting our emotions out on paper. For me, it's never been that. At least I think so. I don't know. I could be wrong, but like I know for a lot of people, it's I gotta get this out. Like it's like calm down. The paper is not going to attack you. Just go against the edge smoothly. It'll be fine. But then you go roughly, and it's like it creates that line, that harsh. Oh my god! Just thinking about it, I learned that actually certain types of mediums can influence your emotions actually. Like watercolor is good if you want to stay calm, but acrylic and oil is not so great because it activates a lot of the amygdala. Apparently, it's very interesting stuff. Sculpting is good for that too, but you do too much of it and then you get stressed out. But for some people, they tend to enjoy painting really thickly, and knowing that, I start to wonder like what is your perception of things? Like are you angry all the time? Like yes, but it's I mean, so that's actually why I choose to not paint with oil or acrylic anymore, because I was crazy back in school. Like I would take sand, mix it with gesso, pile it up, and paint thickly and all that stuff. And it just, I didn't realize it at the time, but then someone told me that this might be what's happening. And so I said, I had one of those like deer in the headlight moments. My entire life flashed before me. I was like, what am I doing with my life? I need to paint with watercolors now. Yeah, I use gouache because it's very it you can't paint thickly with it, but you can also water it down. So there's like a happy balance. You can play with opacities with it, but for my figure drawings, I use this Walnut Drawing Ink. It's Tom Norton's original, light fast, water soluble, acid free. Thank God, drawing ink. and I tend to really like that for the those are the sepia tones in the figure drawings that I do. And then for um, the colorful like half figure ones, I actually use gouache, but I use Crayola crown that's melted on top of those. And again, like I think the first question you asked me is like defining my work or whatever. There was like, uh, I was talking about like connecting with the inner child, using Crayola crowns, bright, colorful things. I can do that. But I've also been exploring sculpting as well. So there's a lot of different things that I'm doing, but it's I thought it was very interesting when somebody told me that the medium you use can affect your mood, and it makes sense now because I tried to do like an acrylic, like a big acrylic painting a couple weeks ago, and I felt horrible afterwards. I was like, nope, I'm never doing this again. I'm staying small. I think also like the size for me too. When I was younger, and this goes back to people influencing your habits creatively. The teachers would always try and push do a really big painting, regardless of whether it was selling or not, and just do a really big painting. Like I find the smaller 8x10 pieces to be the best option for me because they're small and you can literally put them in like a file box and just store them away, never to be seen again by anybody. They're always back there. No, it's just they're easier to organize. It's also a smaller space, and I I don't I have a very difficult time like picking up. Actually, I think the problem is that I pick up too much at once, but my vision is kind of narrow a little bit. So I tend to do better on smaller things because I can process all the information visually rather than having this big thing, and then standing back and it still doesn't work half the time. So I just choose to paint small.
I think there's a lot of benefits though to creating smaller work because you don't have the pressure to have to fill the space with something.
Oh yeah.
And I think that is like such a challenge for a lot of artists who do paint big. And not just that, like you might not have that much space around you. Like, you might be painting in a small space and you just don't have the actual physical space to have big work. And you don't need big work as well. That's the thing. I think there's a huge kind of like misconception that, to be a quote unquote good artist, you need to be able to paint, big images. And that's not the case at all. And also like on social media, nobody knows what size anything is anyway. So,
yeah, unless, but like, another thing too is there's, with Renaissance space, there's the idea of the completed image, taking up the entire canvas. But with modern space, it's very much, it could be a square in the middle of a, 72 by 72 canvas and it's complete. But I also see that there is this thing where, again, people have the need to fill up the entire the canvas, and I personally do not think that you need to do that in order to have a completed image, because from a design perspective, Richard Cornwell was very good at this. Cromwell or Cornwell, I'm horrible with names, but I can see his paintings in my head. Very good at like taking a design, a shape, and filling it with faces and people and creating scenes out of it. And I think that it's important again to ask yourself, like, do I really need to fill up the entire canvas, or can I just leave a bunch of positive, negative or white space, empty space, and that itself creates a composition. It may not fill up the entire page, but it's it's a composition. And also too, there's, what if we step back a little bit and said, well, maybe half the figure should be just sketchy and the other half of the figure should be fully rendered.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely adore work like that. That's kind of almost like half finished, but it's actually quote unquote considered finished. Like I really love that because I think it shows the skill of the artist, how they got from like the sketch to the actual final kind of quote unquote final image. I think it's stuff like that is always fascinating to see.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it is thought process and um style as well. Is the style sketchy? Is it fully rendered? Is it realistic? Can it be a realistic painting and still halfway through you start to decompose the image? There's so many things you can do if you just step back and say, what am I trying to say? What have I learned maybe that has brought me to this point to make me make these decisions?
Yes. And see, that's a good point because, as we said earlier, it's about learning, it's about constantly developing your practice. And actually, how important is it for you personally to evolve as an artist?
Oh man, I'm always trying to challenge myself. I think it's very important. I can't give you a reason why, but I just think it's important. It's almost um like do you really want to be drawing the same type of image for the next, for your whole life? I mean, there's obviously artists that have done well with that. Um, but like, I think sometimes people are just too held up in their perception of things to maybe step back and say, well, again, it goes back to that what if thing. And lately my figurative work, I haven't posted a lot of it lately, but it's starting to no longer be just, up and down, left and right compositionally. It's maybe let's foreshorten some things. Let's have the feet more in the foreground and the rest of the figure go in the back. Let's have the figure recline. Let's cut off parts of that sounds a little bit grotesque, but let's cut off parts of the body to play with it compositionally. And my newer work would definitely be exploring more of the things in perspective, like hands, like more towards the viewers, because I hate hands. So maybe I can challenge myself, and hopefully somebody be like, that's a hand. You did a great job, like or the one I posted recently is a model that I work with. She's not even a professional model. Um, but I said, hey, do you like sun hats? Because I like the idea of sun hats because they allow for like interesting shapes. And I had her like lay back in a recliner, a beach chair or whatever, and the perspective, it gave a little bit of perspective instead of like straight up and down. And again, with images too, there's things you can take away and that you can add as you're going through making decisions. And I decided to add a plant in it, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, so actually, that's a great segue into your figurative work. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about it.
Okay.
So you spoke earlier that you used to do life drawing, and obviously, a lot of your figurative work are nudes. And I'm actually very curious about firstly, is there a reason for that? And secondly, how do you promote that work? Because obviously, social media guidelines are very, very strict. And, I think kind of doing anything that involves nudity nowadays, obviously with artistic intent, can be quite hard. How do you kind of navigate that whole kind of situation?
I mean, I've never had any issues with that. I know a lot of people do, but I've never even when I had all the figurative stuff on my main page, I chose to make that separation because, um, there was a point where I was like, I have a lot of Disney people and a lot of animation people following me on the main page that I have, and I thought to myself, do they really want to be looking at nudes all the time? And so I made this decision to make that separation. But even then, I never had that issue, and I don't know why. Then maybe because some people offer themselves as a figurative account, and that itself sets off a red light for Instagram. But even now, I have the other figurative page, and um, it I don't I don't know. Like, I've just never had that issue. Maybe because it's just, I'm not like waving, hemming and hawing like, hey, look at me over here. Like I draw nudes. It might be one of those things. I just But as far as like subject matter and nudity, so basically, the way I really started to get into figure drawing was I had a friend approach me, um, saying that she wanted to be drawn, and because she was feeling really down about her body, and so that is kind of how it started. Even though I was doing like life drawing in school, I never really had felt an obligation to pursue it in any way, shape, or form outside of academic prospect. But um, this person asked me, and then the next thing I know, another friend asked me because they really like that drawing. And I find that, you know, um, the thing that I really like to explore is the perception of beauty. And um, it really helps with these these people and the way they perceive themselves. They like, oh, is this how you see me? Again, going to that whole perception thing. And I tend to not like to draw a lot of the professional models, I guess you could say. Uh, they are professionals, but
Yeah, I know what you mean. The quote unquote conventional models, I guess.
Yeah, and because everyone draws them.
Yeah.
And as you probably picked up on this at this point in the conversation, I tend to like to stray away from all the the normalcy.
Yes.
And so I like to draw quote unquote normal people. It sounds weird to put it that way, but people who you wouldn't think of as art models. Like it's almost like a John Singer Sargent approach, like just drawing his friends and whatnot. But I tend to work with only a group of people, and before it was exploring the idea of body positivity, um, but now it's just more maybe exploring these people and what they have to offer to art, and the creative process. And every once in a while, I'll find someone who I really get along with. So I also think there's also an idea of connection, um, that it can offer. Um, and you get to know these people. So you're no longer just drawing a figure, you're drawing a figure with the idea of who this person is, you know?
That's really cool because I do agree with you. Like, the whole quote unquote Instagram girls that you see where people just post and, draw the same kind of image, over and over again. There's actually an illustrator called Ergo Josh, I believe, who posted a video on YouTube ages ago about the idea of stop drawing these Instagram girls. And it's kind of like, the very, very cliched kind of typical standard images that you think of when you think of, oh, what can I draw that's going to be really popular?
Yeah.
And what I like about your work specifically is that you're not trying to be popular. You're actually trying to say something with the images you create. I like that's much more meaningful than because you could very much easily find, okay, cool, what's who's quote unquote the hottest model today? Let's just paint pictures and draw pictures of them because people will see it. But it's not the case of you doing that because you're like, well, actually, what I'm actually interested in, what is actually important about the work I'm creating, what positive change can I create through my work? Because there will be positive change for you and the person you're drawing. Because as you said, you have conversations, you get to know people. Art is an extremely good way of connecting with people, as I very much found out. And I think we should never take that for granted, but we do.
Yeah, I mean, and social media too. I think we all take it for granted. I remember what was it like back in October? I think Facebook was down for like 6 hours, and everyone was like, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" And then Twitter went down, and oh my god, like the world's ending. And it's like honestly, at that point, I was just like, I could live like this, It's
Yeah.
because I think social media too creates like a lot of false connections. You know them, but do you really know them? Like how much time do you spend getting to know this person, or do you just message them and send them memes, to get a good
So,
laugh?
see,
Yeah,
that's so true, and that's so relevant for me because I always say to people like, "Oh yeah, this friend." I'm like, "Yeah, they're a friend, but they're not really a friend because I don't really know them. I just speak to them. They're an acquaintance, but I always say friend. But I'm like, are they a friend? Probably not. I'll just say friend because it sounds better. It
yeah,
makes me sound like it actually makes me sound like I have friends. But that's the thing. Like when I'm talking to coworkers, for instance, I'm like, "Oh yeah, this friend that's an artist," and they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I don't really know them that well. I just message them on occasion." So I think that's a really good point. The idea of like the way social media has kind of changed our perspectives on how well we know each other, and our kind of the line between acquaintance and friend is very, very, very blurred. And I think it's actually quite dangerous in some ways.
yeah. I think it's called a parasocial relationship.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
That whole good old parasocial relationship. I think that's super fascinating though, because I think as an artist, I think you could really use that to your advantage.
yeah,
In the right kind of way, obviously with the right intentions, it can be a very
mhm,
wonderful thing because at the end of the day, you're almost like, well, that's sounding too dramatic, I guess, but you're like, you know, a god creating your own world essentially. Um, so it
yeah.
might be a bit too dramatic, but it's kind of true though. Like you are essentially creating your own world, and other people are kind of, you know, wanting to be invited into that, and it's like you get to decide who stays and who doesn't, that kind of stuff. Um,
I mean, you could do that with real life too, but like but I understand what you're saying, and that's why I choose to work with the very specific people that I choose to work with because um, they're not really friends either. Some of the people I have known in real life, and but um, it there seems to be a bond that is created with the art itself, and but then again, like there's figurative artists that I talk to like every day, like Daniel Maidman, for example. Like I own some of his work. I bought some of his work, and we have a connection that way. And we've never met in real life, but we seem to have pretty educated and friendly conversations. But as far as like friends in my personal life, like I've got a best friend, and then I've got another friend that lives like 50 miles away from me, and I talk to them on a daily basis. But people on social media, maybe I talk to not even. They're just there if I want to talk to them. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think social media also too offers an expansive network as well, and it offers. Well, I think it's starting to die down a little bit. But it used to offer big breaks. But there's been a lack of engagement on a lot of things. I've noticed it myself, and I wondered, is that something that I did when I switched over the figurative art to another page? Because I noticed once I did that, everything kind of started, going downhill a little bit. But I think it's people are starting to wake up to the reality that maybe we don't know these people. Maybe we don't want to deal with things like ghosting and having almost compulsive conversations. as far as waiting for responses, whatnot. It can happen in real life, but I say real life, but there's a complete difference, and I think people are starting to wake up from it and step back from it. Uh, because it's been what, like 10 years since all this stuff has been around, like really been around. I know like AOL Messenger was a thing,
Yeah.
but you know, um, yeah, I'm wondering if that noticing what's exactly going on in the bigger picture is what's causing people to engage less with artists on their page.
I kind of think it might be to do with the fact that I think a lot of artists are kind of realizing that they, actually just want to create work. They don't want to be online all the time having to promote what they're doing. Obviously, which is
Yeah.
a key factor, but it's like you want to take the time to actually sit down and create something because you wanted to create it, not because you have an audience to create it for. And I'm
Mhm.
always kind of really fascinated by like at what point does the artist kind of merge with their audience in terms of like what you want to create versus what you know is going to be popular, because it may not even sell, but the idea of being popular and quote unquote going viral and kind of having quote unquote success, I think that can drive a lot of artists to create work they didn't actually care about. They just want to be popular or be seen as, valid in somebody else's eyes.
It's interesting how all that is weaved into the understanding of it, because nobody actually said that it's all promised to you. It's just you tend to pick up on it for some odd reason, and it's the validation and the attention that you get from it, and that releases dopamine, and that causes you to say, "Oh man, I kind of like this," and then you do it more and more, and then it's almost like an addict, and that's exactly what the science is based on. The
Yeah.
science of how formed all that stuff is gambling, but and it, it tends to draw you in, and once you become aware of it, though, that's when you have the ability to step back and say, "Oh, maybe I don't want to post every little single line I draw in my sketchbook. Maybe I want to keep my sketchbook for myself." I know I was really bad with that when I was younger, but then I decided to say, "Oh, well, let me just create work for me." You know, it's very easy to fall into the trap of let me create this work for other people, but that's when you have to start asking yourself questions.
So would you say that you create work for yourself or for other people first?
I would say I usually create it for myself first, you know, but uh, and I think years ago maybe I was doing it for other people, but now, you know, especially with like the new Disney Plus shows and whatnot, you always have that, and the comic movies, you always have the abundance of fan art, and you know, you tend to get on the hype train a little bit, and then you ask yourself, well, am I creating this for me or creating this for someone else? And I always tend to like I get caught in the trap of falling somewhere in the middle. As weird as that sounds, because like you're into the like comic books, but in Disney. But are you doing this for you, or are you doing this to post it on Instagram or Twitter? It's very easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, which kind of goes back to our question like, earlier on the list, which is the idea of like, is creating images of pop culture an easy route to success?
No, it's not. Plain and simple. I saw that question. I already know my answer was gonna be no. But then again, I know people. Fan art contests have that uh, bad rap of taking advantage of artists. But I actually know an artist who got their big break from an art contest, and they work with Hot Topic now and a bunch of other companies, creating their work, for them. When I say for them, I mean it's the artist's work. They just take pop culture images and translate it into their work. His name is Brian Reedy. He does woodblock printing. And oh man, I've got a whole book of his work. It's incredible. But yeah, and I was just like, man. And that's why I always wonder, like, are fan art contests really that bad? If someone I know got the big break, how bad can it be? But pop culture, like, the problem is everyone draws it. So you really got to set yourself apart. So it's not necessarily about the subject that you're drawing, it's how you draw it, and that's how you would attract your audience.
That concludes the first part of my conversation with artist Danny Kidwell. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me an email at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com or get in touch via Instagram and Twitter. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can be found on a variety of sites such as Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you can listen to podcasts. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing to help spread the word and garner us more attention. Also, please don't forget to check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk, which is an archive of daily art inspiration and written interviews. Furthermore, if you're an artist or a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. If you'd like to support the platform further, we now also have a Patreon page. Tiers start from £1, and you can find more information and rewards over at patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. Additionally, if monthly donations are not your thing, we also have a PayPal for one-time donations. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening to this episode today. Until next week, folks, please stay safe.